So, good morning. Thank you for coming. It is very early time. So, I named the presentation the saxophone as a creative interface. And why? I just realized a few time ago that actually I'm using the instrument as an interface to create sound materials, and materials especially for composers to work. So, and this belongs a little bit to my artistic profile, without thinking very much about this, but obviously when we get related with a kind of aesthetic, people start to know us with a certain artistic profile, which sometimes is not completely true, because we can be well known by doing something, but as a saxophonist, in my case, I still do a lot of acoustic music and just not involved full-time into music with electronics, but that's what we are speaking about today. So, during my recent years, I've been obviously developing some discography using certain kinds of technologies. Saxophones and electronics that actually needed some extra work, which is related to electronic music sometimes, which is the question of recasting. As we know, electronic systems are always being updated, and this became a problem in recent years. Some pieces that were composed in the 90s, sometimes in the 80s, but the systems are not working anymore because of max updates, whatever. So part of our work sometimes is as well to find solutions to update these materials, so we could perform these pieces in these days and just not lose those kinds of materials. So there's some discography that where I explore the recasting apart from the new composition and new premieres and commissions, etc. So back in time, I think I started around 2007, 2008, developing this kind of performative contents. And my first project was called Sound of Shadows. So our knowledge had to develop in order to know not only how to work with the instrument, but to work with the computers, with the softwares, with the systems. So I started to think on this, and I'm together actually with a British researcher called Peter Furness, we started to call to this changing paradigm of performance augmented performance, or actually developing an active approach to musical performance and to musical knowledge. So this all, if you want to give a broader idea of the philosophical contents which are involved as well in this kind of practices, we are within the post-humanism context. What this means? So the post-humanism actually is related as well as a critique of anthropocentrism. So meaning that as human beings we cannot be considered anymore as the center of the whole world. Actually this is connected as well to other theories on actually human ecology as well. So we know that when we speak about humanism, we are putting human beings in the center of the world, and we definitely need to take a little bit this idea to an extended context. And why it relates to musical? Because actually computers started to occupy a space in our environment. So this means that technology now is just a part of the world. We cannot divide humans and technology, or animals and technology, or trees and technology, nature and technology. Technology just is here as our air to breathe. So this is what it means, the context of post-humanism into this music. Obviously, this concept appeared in arts at the beginning. So science fiction and this kind of things started to raise these questions. And why this music is post-human? Because it's impossible to perform without the technology. So once again, the technology just integrates our environment. So, and we are speaking about distributed cognition. This refers to what I was mentioning. So the integration of the computer, of the systems, now is part of our embodied knowledge. When we are performing something and we need to use pedals, actually we need to practice this behavior, this physical behavior, which dislocates our focus a lot of times from the instrument. So we are actually in a process of relearning to play the instrument. So why this music is hybrid and why it has mutation? Because of course all the effects and all the technology are mutating the sound, are transforming the material, sometimes in real time, sometimes fake in real time, but it doesn't matter. It just, now we have the possibility in a microscopic way to treat the materials, to change them, to reconfigure them, to give them different affordances or different meanings, etc. And then again, all this idea of computer and now artificial intelligence, etc. etc. So I started to think, well, not only me, but our community, we are facing new challenges. And maybe because of these new challenges, I would say that the German world started to develop these master degrees specialized into the performance of contemporary music, or into the performance of contemporary music with technology. So we all know that in the regular conservatory we are not trained effectively to do this. So it's a personal, most of the times are personal discoveries. That's why it takes so much time to manage it. If it's possible to feel that we are managing, because we know that each piece requires different systems, and each piece becomes a different world sometimes in how to deal with performance. So another concept which is really interesting, I think, is from Magnussen. which it refers as a technology. Most of us, our view and our understanding of music depends on the instrument, because most of us, we learn music through the instrument. Even our capabilities of analyzing music as always our instrumental references and our instrumental practices into our mind. Of course, composers and especially I would say mature composers have a different notion of all of this, but this doesn't happen to most of the instrumentalities. We are really close, and the instrument is so much embedded in us that it really gives us a kind of vision about music and analyzing music and doing music. So this poses also the question of what is the new instrumentality. So instruments are categorized under the organ, style, sax categories. But of course, when we start to integrate technology and new approaches to instruments, the organ, style, sax definitions of instruments are not enough. So a lot of researchers are looking for new definitions. I quite find interesting this definition actually by Deleuze, that considers the concept of assemblage. So we can see and understand instruments as an assemblage, as a collection of ideas. So we can evaluate instruments these days not only by the sound production, but about their purpose, their intention, how the learning curve it is in different instruments. We all know that the saxophone, for instance, has a very smooth learning curve. I would say it's very easy to put kids playing. It's very easy in the first years that they achieve nice musical results. If we compare to an oboe or to a bassoon, we know that the learning curve of the learning process it's much harder. And why this is on the saxophone? Because of course the saxophone is a quite new instrument. So this means that Adolphe Sax, when started to develop the instrument, he was conscious about the interface. That's why we know this sax interface that affected as well the bass clarinet. So, and the saxophone is very linear. So even the keyboard, we understand that we open holes and the tuning, the pitches are raising, we close holes, they are going lower. And if we compare to an oboe, I mean, it's not the same thing. It's the same thing when we are playing multiphonic, but sometimes we see, oh, the multiphonic goes down, but then the fingerings go up. So this kind of things is because of technology conscious as well. So it's important to categorize an instrument as well about what the audience knows and perceives about the instrument. In the case of the saxophone, we all experience that the public is always expecting something from a saxophone concert. Come on, we all have the experience of starting a concert, play a contemporary piece, and half of the audience goes out because they were expecting a jazz concert or something more jazzy. So this means that actually, when we speak about instrument, we have to consider, of course, the social context of the saxophone, especially in the US, that the saxophone was a little bit connected with new rich people and really trendy and fancy in the 20s booms. So this all categorizes our instrument these days. So using technology, we always should consider, or developing materials, we always should consider this in both ways. In one hand, what the human performance is bringing to computers. So all the time that we are developing a new patch, a new composition, a new interactive process, our role is trying to humanize a little bit the computer or the system. So the system, it will not sound or behave as artificial. So we are constantly trying to humanize the systems, the max patches, the programming, wherever. And we all know that the computer has the power to create cyber performance. So it's actually not only extending, but I prefer to use the term augmenting our capabilities. But it's not only a piece with electronics, it is an algorithmic piece. So this means that all the composition process is based on algorithms. And of course the intention of the composer, which is Michael Edwards, was to create almost an orchestra of saxophone. So the electronics seems to be reacting to the saxophone material, but actually everything was preconceived. Of course, the performance of this kind of pieces poses a lot of challenges. How to integrate our materials with the materials that are already embedded into the composition. So this should sound as one saxophone player. So in this case, it's the soloist that has really to adapt not only the attacks, but the sound, the color of the multiphonics with the material that are already there. Otherwise, it will sound a little bit like a playload, artificial. So the need to humanize this kinds of process. And because of this, especially this piece, I started to face another problem, which we all know as well, which is the question about multiphonics. So composers more and more, especially because it's an aesthetic of saturation, Felsengo from France, etc., and they like to build phrases, very granular phrases, so the multiphonics have this granular character, and we know that in electronics, granular synthesis is always being used. So there's a fascination about these grains, which has to do with the microscopic work on sound as well. And dealing with the phrases of multiphonics, we know that most of the times we have to rearticulate the positions to go on the suggested multiphonics. There's a lot of bibliography, Chienzi, Weiss, etc. But they didn't do this work. They don't have to do. I'm lucky that they didn't. So I had space to do some work on this, which is starting just on one pivot multiphonic, and I was using the Weiss book with Matthew. So I selected one multiphonic, and I notated and recorded all the possible movements from these multiphonics without having to rearticulate the position. So that's why I have, for instance, this is a famous one, an easy one, B flat -7, and where I can go from here without releasing and attack a new position. So I was making, this was my result. Probably I should be updated or verified again in some years, but this was what I did in 2018. Changing for then -1 with -1, then with back to the pivot, then go to -2, back to the pivot, go to -3, and having these alternations. Of course, we can move. I can leave B flat -7, -4, and move directly to plus D flat. So inside of this group, there's a lot of trajectories that composers can use. So, because of that, I wanted to provide this material to composers for them to choose the multiphonics just based on sound, because we are speaking about sound-based music, not based music. So it has to be the sound that will give you the compositional options. But most of them, of course, they want to see the partials, they want to see the notation as well of the multiphonics. So I programmed with Luis Neto Costa a little system that they could drag and drop the audio file that I showed you and see in real time the partials and the notation of the multiphonics. So in gradients of black and gray, we can see which multiphonics are more present, which tone are more present. So here, for instance, it's the middle E and the middle A that are stronger in this analysis. So apart from drag and drop, you can select just the multiphonic that you want to see the notation, and then you can imprint sequences of notation. This is the same position, and then you have here in red which fingering are you moving, and you have the resulting notation. So, and to make my own catalog, I will build another system. So I can select the keys of the saxophone, select the permutation, and then each record, play the multiphonic, and automatically the file has the position of the multiphonic. Of course, the position just means something for us. The composer, if not a saxophonist, as Jen, will not understand, at least in a deep extent, what means E minus 3. So, but he can notate directly on the score when he wants to use this, and that's what is really helpful. So, for instance, in this piece, we were using the system, but the composer decided to write a tablatura instead of anything else. So, the important thing for us is to know which fingering we want to play. Sometimes it helps to have the notation, so we know that, okay, I have to go lower, I have to go higher, I have to look for this partial. But in a kind of this piece, I think this was enough. So for instance, if you look here, you notice that we have the same position of the multiphonic with just changing of a few keys from one to another. So this means that this section, for instance, was just using the system that I showed you. So this piece just have multiphonics and muffled sounds. There's no natural sounds involved on it. So obviously it's not all the bars use this, but some sections are using this. Another example is Otku. Actually, it was premiered in Zagreb at the World Saxophone Congress. And so here we don't have long phrases of permutations, but we always have groups of two multiphonics that need to be connected together. So once again, for this kind of movements, we are using the same system. So I can just articulate between this and this and this and this without the need to articulate, otherwise it will be impossible to do this. So there's a version, I will jump a bit, there's a version for saxophone, electronics and and there's a version as well, more recently, just for saxophone and electronics without the sound. When developing this kind of material, sometimes there's some outside effects, I would say, because, for instance, in this piece, the composer is not using the system for multiphonics, he's not using even most of the time multiphonics, but he was taking the samples of the multiphonics to create new textures for his piece. So the advantage when we create some kind of material is that composers can use this material, which is great because when composers use our materials, actually we are really augmented our sound, our behavior, because then it's our articulation, it's our details on playing that are embedded in the electronics of the piece, so it actually becomes an extension of us, which is quite different when someone else provides the materials. It's not my materials, it's not my way of playing, so it's really nice. I mean, I will not compare it with a son, but it's part of us that already then are in the piece, and we integrated and we became common with these materials. Other examples, of course, I will not pass all the pieces, but there's another example which makes this this kind of use of materials in the electronics, which was a piece for this is for actually virtual choir, organ, and solo saxophone is a requiem. It's a 1 hour piece for video mapping and electronics and saxophone. And it was a 360 recording. This is the video, but the keynote just gives us flat, so it's strange. Another example, and this is the last example of pieces, and this deals with a different context, which is pieces for multiple saxophones that suddenly we record both parts. Actually, this is a piece, like the first one that I showed for 2 albums. This is a piece for 2 sopranos that was a little bit lost in the catalog of Michael Edwards, and I was working on the recasting, not only the electronic system, but as well recording both parts. And I remember that I had a big surprise when I started to hear in the studio the result of the 2 parts, which is a very unmusical idea of when we have chamber music or when we have a piece for 2 parts. Our brain is expecting a duo. Our brain is not expecting the same person playing both parts, because it becomes a little bit artificial, actually. We don't think about this, it's just a reaction of the brain. Suddenly you have the same articulation, the same approach to the instrument, and that sounds very unnatural, I would say. I mean, it's good for the concept of perfection on the recording, because we have the same kind of the details, but it's just not very human. That's why I integrated this piece as well in the catalog of post-human pieces, because of all of this. People think that, oh, it's kind of reactive, generic. It isn't, it's just a duo for saxophone. And now you heard the electronic materials and all the grains. So this is another thing that I do a lot, which is the development of material, but transforming the saxophone material. So for instance, in this piece, we have already this similarity with the sounds that were in the electronics of the last piece. And this is some work that I do based on programming. And why to use programming, developing algorithmic context? Because actually I think I cannot produce this kind of sound results on a DAW, on Logic or on Ableton or whatever. So programming actually entered the stage since the mid, I would say that the late years of the 20th century, in languages as Lisp, as these days Python, etc. So we could treat just samples and give them musical values. So again, it's about creating materials not only for my compositions but for the composers to use. So again, this kind of little effects and things. In this case, I put it just here, the example of software just for micro montage. So this kind of ways when put it together, we call this as a technique of micro montage, which comes from the electroacoustic music environment. So yeah, and just to finish very fast, I don't want to. I've been making some music. I'm not considering these real compositions. I call them more sound art, because what I'm doing is to put this kind of sounds together and to use this kind of sounds together for other purposes. So this is a piece for reactive visuals, electronics, and ensemble. Transformation of saxophone songs. It's just a saxophone song. So it's an installation for, it can be ambisonics in this case, just a demo video. It's for speakers. So I consider different sound objects, and the sound objects, they move into the space between the speakers. So each sound object just has like a living, as a life. So they move independently. So you see these movements are the sound objects moving in spaces like living agents. They are randomized, so we cannot predict how they behave. Maybe when hour seeing how they behave, I can have some conclusions, but that's not the idea. Another thing that I like to do, which is not connected to electroacoustic music, but to the capture of sound objects and sound material for compositions, is the creation of instruments. basic principles on making percussive instruments, how they resonate, how we extend vibration, etc., etc. And lastly, probably some of you know already, it was the development of an augmented instrument for controlling electronic music parameters, especially used for improvisation and this kind of
whereas I agree with the learning curve in saxophone is quite smooth or kind of easy to get into. The electronics is kind of the opposite. It's a really, really steep learning curve. So for example, the things you're showing here require coding, coding in XMSP, all kinds of complicated stuff. But I think there are a lot of saxophonists who really are interested in that kind of music but don't have the access. They don't really want to spend 3 years doing a dissertation like we both run on topic. So do you have some, I see the future kind of this music and kind of integrating saxophone and electronics more to really make questions if we're able to find solutions to that learning curve. Is that something you thought about at all?
Well, actually, Michel Weikitz, which invented the hands, which was one of the first gestural instruments, so he was looking for a more direct way of communicating, so giving at least a relation between gestures and sound results. He was saying that difficulties or a certain learning curve is fundamental to develop virtuosism. So when the learning curve is very, very low, which happens sometimes with apps, people get bored very fast. So it's good to have a certain kind of learning curve that pushes you and gives you motivation, like gaming, like playing a little bit. So you have to, okay, I'm in this step, now I'm in this level. So you build on the level. The problem with electronic music is that the materials are so prolific that it's hard to concentrate sometimes just on one software platform, just on one thing, and that's the main challenge when we start our process of learning this. Because you open like a Music Tech magazine every month, and there's lots of things coming out from the factories. So I would say that the first thing is to reduce a little bit the options and the tools and concentrate just on a few of them. It's like you choose your software and then you learn your software as much as possible. The problem that you are posing as well is that apart from the interest, most of the people are not really spending time then learning the systems that they have. So if we are using pedals, we need to use those effect processors and belts and study them a little bit as the instruments, so we really can know what we are doing. And I think it's fundamental to, I mean, it's about economics as well. If you have funding for projects, so you can pay for a software developer, you can pay for an audio engineer, you can have a team with you. But in our cases, we are small companies, very small companies, let's say. Most of the times we have to do it all. So I would say that there's no other way of learning as much as possible. Madrid, for instance, as with Martinez, it was Martinez that created it. They have a specific master degree into contemporary performance with technology. I think this is quite important for the future of higher education. So people can specialize, and then, of course, teachers can a little bit orient this process of learning, because the lack of orientation can result in very dispersed thing. Coffee or? Yeah,
I have two questions. First of all, congratulations. It's the first time that I can attend one of your conference lectures, and for me it was wonderful. But I have two questions. How invasive is the electronic setup in the saxophone? Is just only a microphone and a controller, or do you have more devices?
No, so this system is controlling software. Actually, you can use it. It's MIDI. It sends MIDI information. So this doesn't process any audio. This is just a microcontroller analyzing the data from the sensors. So, and then Max MSP, I have a little software that just interprets the incoming thing. So the microphone is just sending the audio to the computer, and then what this is doing is affecting the audio parameters. But it's very flexible, so you can use it in multiple ways. There's no one way of using. Each piece, it can be understood a little bit as a different mode. So I can be using this ribbon sensor, for instance, for the volume of a granular effect. I can use these two buttons to trigger different presets, like preset 1, preset 2, preset 3. So this is just an up and down, so it increments one number and decreases one number. And then, for instance, these two volume controllers, we can control the gain of the saxophone and the overall volume of the electronic. So in the beginning I was thinking on this as something that I could have with me to control things that sometimes you are not able to control anymore, or you need to go to the audio interface, or you need to do this to the audio technician. So it was for safety reasons. So okay, I can include this, and all the pieces with Max MSP, I can integrate this block and just connect this to the volume of this, to the trigger of that.
And the second one, I'm thinking of my students, and are your materials available for them in any way?
Yes. Actually, I have a section on my website. It's a bit outdated. I need to take some time, but I have some materials there. And for instance, the recordings of the multiphonics, I share it with the composers. It's when they, I would like to do something with this. Okay, I share the material, I share the software, and that's it. It's for sure. It was paid by the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology. Well, not paid, but they give me the funding for the research.
Is the multiphonic software also available to you online, or should somebody contact you directly?
Yeah, I have the description on the website, but it's there. People send me an email and I share it. Because it's a huge folder. Like I don't have a server to upload all these procedures, so I have to send it through WeSend it or something. I did it for the alto saxophone, and I started for the baritone saxophone. I would like to do it, of course, for the different saxophones because we know that the number of possible permutations change slightly, so it's just tools. So that's why I don't call myself as a composer. I call myself as a material provider.